This lesson is part of number theory, where we're going to be seeing how to compare numbers, usually just two numbers, whether they are less than, greater than, or equal to each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to tie this into our last lessons on place value and phase value, and we're going to work with what we like to call our alligators in this case. So our alligators look, and I don't know if you can see that, so I'm going to make it a bit darker, like this, or like this. Each of these symbols is one of these things. This here means greater than, this here means less than, and this means equal to. And so we're going to compare two numbers, and we're going to use these symbols while we're comparing them. And also we're going to use our knowledge of place value. So let's just get into it, but with some examples, because that's always the best way I find. The first thing, I'm going to give you two numbers, 8567 on one side, and then 8513 point, let's say 425. Now, the first thing that I feel like you should always do, and I'm going to write this down, number one, is check how many digits come before the decimal. Now, this is very important because obviously if you have more digits on this side of the decimal, the number is probably going to be bigger than the other one. That's the first step. The second step would be if there are equal amounts, which in this case I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. The second amount is the second step, is to check each number one by one. In my case, both of these numbers have the same number of digits before the equal sign, or before the decimal. Let's check one by one. Both of these start with an 8, so nothing's changed. Doesn't really help me out very well. They're both in this case, they're both in the thousandths place. In the hundredths place, they both have a 5. So again, that doesn't really help me. It's still the same. But then when I go to my tens place, my first one has a 6 and my second one has a 1. Which one is bigger? Well, the 6 is bigger than the 1, which means that this number here is going to be greater than this number here. And so we are going to put the greater than symbol like this. Another way that will help you on writing what symbol is, I always tell my students that the alligator eats the bigger number. And in this case, the bigger number is 8,567. Instead of doing it number by number, you could also just do this in your brains. So if I look here and I have 8,567, I know that 8,567 is greater than 8,513. So you can do it pretty fast if you have the knowledge and you can do it that way. So let's give you another example. 8, 4, 5, 6, and 2, 5, 5, 4, 5, something like that. Now, if you'll remember on the last slide, I said to you, check how many digits come before the decimal. Now, in this case, you don't see the decimal, but it's kind of like hiding here, right? It's kind of like when you have money and you have 0, 0 next to it, but we don't put it because it's not necessary. So now, if we look, we will see that on this number here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers before the decimal. But here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers before the decimal. I can also tell you that this number here is 8,456, whereas this number here is 25,545. And with my knowledge of numbers and everything I've just said, I can conclude that this number is definitely the bigger of the two. So we're going to have our alligator chomping at it. Another example that I'm going to give you, let's see. We're going to do something that's pretty similar to each other, so that way we can actually have to do this like by looking through a microscope. So this is the first number I'm going to give you, and then I'm going to give you something that looks very similar to it, but isn't quite the same. So I'm giving away the fact that it's not equal to each other. There's the same amount of numbers on before the decimal, and in fact, it's the exact same number before the decimal. So we're going to start looking at after the decimal here, and we're going to do it place by place. In the tenths column, we have a 4, so that doesn't help us. In the hundredths column, we have a 5, which also doesn't help us. Then we have a 6, which also doesn't help us, because they both have a 6, a 7, but then the last number is a 9 for the first one and 8 on the second one. So I already know that 9 is bigger than 8. So if I talk about where am I going to put my alligator is going to eat this number. And my last example, because we have to use all symbols, of course, is say I give you something that looks like 0.6897. And again, 6897. Well, they're neither bigger or less than each other. They are equal, and that's when we do the equal sign. And that's it for comparing our numbers.